respond with thanks, because that's the only way to respond. Nice. Nice. I mean, next thing we'll do is we'll just tell him to get on here. You can run the show. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no. Beer has a tendency to go all over the goddamn place. It's great that way. While you while you fix yourself, it's fine. Um, so so this week, since I am back in South Carolina, thing that I was drinking was and no longer is because I finished all of it uh, for good reasons. It is the hazelnut brown ale from River Rat, which recently, this past year, they received a gold medal for at the LA beer competition that they submitted it to. I think in total, those guys, which they're a local brand down here, in total, those guys received like 6 medals this past year. Like an impressive amount, for a like small brewery, especially one just like you wouldn't think like Columbia, South Carolina, like great brewing city. Normally when you think that, you're thinking like Asheville, you're thinking like, somewhere in like New York City, thinking LA, Colorado. No, Columbia, South Carolina. 6 medals this past year. So, oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. Emphasis on slightly. We're still still a just disjointed mess. Yeah. That's not wrong. I don't know if that's any better. Yeah. But but importantly, you're not hearing him, so that's actually a problem. Sorry. Sorry, everybody, for some technical difficulties. Yeah, we didn't assume
Okay,
that
I'm
he
in.
was muted
I'm
this time.
back. Thank you for noticing. Uh, glad to know that I can't manage technical things at all, and
Yeah,
that
no.
uh,
I
and
might
that
have
I
to take
suck.
the reins back from you. now that
All
I'm
right, I'm
now that
back.
I'm in a position where I can do that, might have to.
Yeah. Also, Comfy Con, he better fucking apologize. How dare you? How dare you? All right, and then a special thank you to you, Goulis, for letting me know that I was muted. I appreciate it because I just got your message.
Lyrics also mentioned it.
I know, but I
Only,
want.
only thinking Goulis.
Hold on a
the
second.
man who's-
I'm thinking everybody. I'm going down the line.
Uh-huh.
I was gonna give lyrics a proper German Danke. In fact, a Dankeschön, but
Oh.
but you had to go and ruin it. You had to go and kill my vibe.
Well, good.
All right. Either way, I'm drinking the Grim Crystal Sink, which is not very well rated on Untapped, but despite that, it is one of 2 Grim options that exists, and so I must try it. And you know what? I have to say, I'm quite happy with it. It's interesting.
I am a big fan of Grimm, and the fact that they recently started up their production facility over in New York makes me incredibly happy. They are no longer the fun nomads that they used to be, but now this gives us a chance to actually get more Grimm, and also like I don't know. I have a feeling like they're going to actually put out some of the stuff that they were kind of keeping as one-offs previously. So here's hoping.
Yeah, I gotta say though, since they're up in New York, the question becomes now: do we have problems getting them out on the West Coast? Because I'm gonna be most sad if this is the last Grim I'm gonna be able to get, just because they're not gonna distribute out here.
I mean, last I kind of overheard was the fact that they were going to keep most of their pre-existing distribution network, if not expand it, just because now they don't have to worry about paying the extra fees for like actually using other people's facilities and shit. So, if anything, I think this like you're only going to see more of them.
I can only cross my fingers and hope. I gotta say, one reviewer of the Crystal Sink that I was reading, that I was questioning just because it seemed like such a weird description. They talked about a lot of fruity flavors, a lot of esters, and then a bubblegum finish. And I was skeptical, just like I'm skeptical of Comfy Con's derby name being Grim Baby, about that bubblegum flavor. And I gotta say, it's there. But it's not obtrusive. This is a weirdly subtle beer. And if I can take a moment to wax lyrical about brews, Lord knows I wax lyrical often enough as it is, but 10 out of 10, this beer is worth it just because of how much subtlety there is in its flavor. I don't know if that's a good thing, or whether my taste buds are just fried from watching Einstock fly all over my room, but I'll reserve my judgment for that later. But it's such a mellow flavored beer. Like, it's got flavor, don't get me wrong. But it's supposed to be a saison brewed with Earl Grey tea. That's what caught my eye. That's what I wanted to do. But there's something really weird about how, with all that description, that one reviewer's comment about bubblegum, and maybe I'm just looking for it, and it's just like this weird thing.
Yeah.
But I'm getting it. On the finish, there's like this weird twang of bubblegum. And yes, Comfy Con, bubblegum flavors can be subtle.
Well, it's probably, if I had to take a guess, I mean, it's most certainly because of the yeast that they use. A lot of Belgian yeasts are known to give bubblegum kind of flavors, especially like the Y yeast varieties. Probably this is an Ardennes yeast. If I had to take a guess. I mean, I haven't had the Crystal Sink. But if you're saying it's a saison that they're doing with Earl Grey tea with bubblegum finish, that's probably what I would use. But then again, that's kind of one of their things, though, is just going a little bit out there with their sours. So Lord only knows.
Ah, important note: not a sour beer at all.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those weird summer saisons that crop up from time to time. That
Gotcha.
don't have that farmhouse flavor to them. They're very much of the... We're a light summer beer masquerading as a farmhouse ale.
Gotcha. So they're almost aiming for this to be closer to like a lighter, like almost to the point of like a low carb shandy, or like a something of those lines, where it's doesn't really have, like you said, the farmhousey kind of flavor to it, but it's still a lighter Belgian.
Yeah, it's very unique. I'll give it that. It's unique. It's interesting. I do prefer the other Grim I have in my fridge. I've saved it for a friend, so when he comes over, I will give it to him. as it is his. But
Which one is that, if you don't mind me asking?
the friend or the beer?
The beer. The beer. I won't out any friends.
I was actually vague about it specifically because I cannot remember which one it's called.
Is it one of the?
It's the pop. Yeah, it's the Galaxy Pop. Yeah,
you sent me a picture.
Yeah, we converged on that idea simultaneously. Yes.
I'm a big fan of the pop series. They do a fantastic job with all of them. I think every pop I've had has been like phenomenal.
Yeah.
So no, I'm excited to hear the response from that one.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know because I'm ecstatic about it. So one quick thing I wanna jump into just because I tasted a beer recently that I thought was really interesting. I kind of want to get your thoughts on it, and then we'll go to actually scheduled segments that we planned because we're good people and we're awesome. And also, fuck you, Comfy Con. That milk sugar is delicious. That's what makes that pop series so good. All right, I've interacted with the chat, and okay, so I was recently at a tasting, and they served a lot of different things. One was amazing, and I think I talked to you about it. It was the jasmine rice lager that was fucking delicious. It was hold on, let me pull up it's the jasmine.
It sounds really good.
Okay, it's the jasmine rice pilsner. Phenomenal beer. It is, by many accounts, the best pilsner I've had in a long time. Super refreshing, but not the beer I wanted to talk about. Haha, the bait and switch. What I actually wanted to ask you about was, in that lineup, they also had a really, really interesting sour beer.
Okay.
It was called the Bloom. It was totally malolactic fermented with high residual sugars and came out to only 3.5% alcohol, I want to say. Maybe even lower.
Okay.
And I was very confused about this beer when I tried it, or when I looked at it, really. And after tasting it, I gotta say, 10 out of 10.
Really?
Delicious. It's delicious. Like, I don't know what else to say about it.
Huh.
It's like the perfect... I don't want to call it, like, kids beer, because, don't drink kids. But, like, it's almost like adult soda. It's so relaxed and it's so mellow, unlike my swearing. Thank you, lyrics, for catching me on that. I'll be good, I swear. But it was just this interesting experience. It was a low ABV sour beer that was just sour enough to, like, tingle the palate, but it wasn't that much more. It just kind of let you know it was sour as a reminder, and then just moved on. And so I want to get your thoughts on beer like that, the low ABV, super refreshing kind of chill beers that I don't think we see a lot these days.
Yeah, the only kind of exceptions to that would actually be I mean, it's not a huge kind of uptick, but a lot of the breweries that like to experiment quite a bit have been kind of hitting on beers like this, such as now I'm going to butcher the pronunciation and you can fix me on this, but kvass.
Oh, kvass, yeah.
Okay, so I was close.
You were right on.
Appreciate it. But beer like that where it's like literally rye bread that you just kind of throw in for a fermenter for like a week, if that, and then it comes out to like maybe 2.5% at like a high point. Stuff like that is becoming surprisingly popular, mostly because it's because of how refreshing it is and how quick of a turnover there is for that. So especially during like the summer months, you'll see especially up in the Northeast, you'll start to see a lot of breweries kind of pumping out things like kvass. There was another style too, which is becoming really popular. IPA, yes, absolutely. That is something that will be absolutely at a low ABV.
No, the rye PA is the worst thing ever.
We won't rant about it again. We did that the first episode, even though that's lost to history.
It's still
Can we
on our
talk about
Twitch.
that?
It's still there.
Is it? Can we forget it's still on our Twitch? But
No.
so the reason why you would drink this instead of a Rolling Rock is because this has a lot more depth of flavor. Like typical kvass has like so it's rye bread, it's lemon or some sort of citrus, but I believe lemon is traditional and raisins, I want to say.
Yeah, you can have a
So
lot of different stuff in there.
but like I mean, for the most part it's got a decent flavor profile to it, but it's just really really light. And that's kind of the draw is that like it's got enough depth to it, but like you're basically drinking like you said before, it's like adult soda.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I'm a strong proponent of that. And actually, I was talking to whatchamacallit, Comfy about this a week ago when she came to visit, and I was saying like, how awesome would it be to do a low ABV, high carb, like braggot or mead, like something that's like very like honey rich, but like incredibly bubbly and like less than 6%. Because I don't think you can really pull off a 3% with a mead, but like a 5, maybe a 6%. But like high carb, like I'm talking like 2.5, I'm talking like 2.75, like somewhere up there, like in like Shandy Radler territory.
I could get down with that, you know? Especially with those honey flavors, for sure that sounds awesome.
It's just kind of finding that nice balance of like, because you don't want it to be too honey forward, like you get like with that like syrupiness that you get with certain meads. So it's kind of finding that balance, which is honestly where I think like maybe doing a hybrid Radler would be awesome the first time around. That way you're still kind of getting that Radler base, but then you're throwing that like primary sugar of the honey like in there. So I don't know. I'm gonna be toying around a lot with that this upcoming.
You know what? Hell yeah. That sounds like a ton of fun. You 100% should do that.
Yeah, I mean, well, not to kind of give away too much of what I am up to these next probably year and change, but I'm going to be really cranking out a lot of meads and beers for competition. So that's one of the things I actually have on my list of things that I want to do is to try to see if I can come up with a high carb mead for the experimental category. Try to see what judges think of that.
I'd be down. I look forward to trying that. I want to throw back to a quick tangent, just because of how coincidental it is. I see Comfy in the chat is calling out some goulash.
Uh,
I actually made a giant thing of Hungarian goulash just like the day before yesterday.
I
And
saw that on your Instagram. Yeah.
and I gotta say, paprika beer is what I've been thinking about ever since.
Interesting.
Because Hungarian sweet paprika would be so interesting to throw into all those different pepper beer setups, you know?
I was actually just the second you mentioned that, my first thought went to whatchamacallit, Westbrook's Mexican Cake IPA. I I think that that would do really well instead of the I think they use habaneros in there. I think instead of that, using the sweet paprika could be a really interesting way to bring it out because they use it in such an interesting amount. I'm not 100% sure when they throw it in. It's something I'd really like to talk to them about. But you barely taste the fact that it is like a hot pepper. Get like a little bit of that pepper, but like barely. So
If
like
if
I
that's the
think
beer I'm
pepper would
thinking
be
about,
interesting.
I think I've tried it.
The we talked about it on here before because I had the collab version where I got Evil Twin and Westbrooks, the Imperial, Biscotti, whatever Mexican cake IPA.
Okay. Well, I actually have in my fridge the Evil Twin version of that because I ended up finding it and picking it up.
Well, which one? Because they've done like 6, I think, different collabs for this at this point. Did you get
The one that's not a collab, the one that's just the Evil Twin side.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't find the
Gotta-
collab out here.
You'll have to. Well, if it's. Oh, so just the Evil Twin side. So you just got the Imperial, like, biscotti, whatever, but not Mexican cake.
Yeah, as ComfyCon calls it, the Mexican cake bullshit.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
She's not a big fan of anything that's Imperial. Once it starts getting to, like, that syrupy territory.
Gotcha. So she's not mourning the loss of the
yeah.
bourbon barrel barley wine.
Mm-hmm.
But ComfyCon, it's so important.
It is important.
Tastes like sugar syrup. Someone bathed the foot in.
Yeah, and that's what makes it $70.
Exactly.
Foot.
You gotta get that you gotta get that palate up to the level. Yeah, you gotta just don't set anything on fire. Lyric, I'm concerned. I'm so concerned right now. but hey, to each their own. To each their own. All right. Yeah, that's really all I had to say about goulash and whatnot. I think we can actually go to our next segment.
Oh, actually, before we continue on to that, not to tangent right here, but you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I've talked about twice now. Bless you. But
I
talked about
muted
twice now.
myself to not sneeze, and then you
Oh.
blew my cover, you son of a bitch.
Didn't know if it was muted or not. I'm just trying to be a normal human being. So yeah, so right now I've talked about how River Rat's gotten awards and how I want to send things out to competition. So an interesting topic is actually that I kind of been meaning to talk about is the BJCP judging, and how if anybody is actually any interested, there are resources that I can link to you in the chat for becoming a beer judge. Anybody can do it. You don't have to have any sort of qualifications. You just pass a test. And depending on how well you do on the test will kind of determine where you can judge, which is super cool. Just because it's a very meritoriously based thing. So like if you score well enough to pass, but not much more than that, you can do like local competitions. If you're like the best of the best with your exam scores, you judge national competitions. So it's I think it's super cool, and I'm gonna link some stuff in the chat if anybody is any interested. But yeah, contribute.
Yeah, I gotta say,
Get back to the beer.
there's actually a really good, if you guys are on Android, if anyone listening now or in the future is on Android, there's a phenomenal app that the BJCP put out that has all of the different beer styles and criteria in it as a study guide. I don't think they have it for iOS. I just recently made the transition to Apple, and while I'm in the Blue Bubble Club, I'm at a loss for the things that I once knew and loved. One of which is that BJCP. I'm not going crazy, right? It's the BJ. Yeah, it is the BJCP.
Oh, you're right.
It just feels so weird to say that way. I've been watching too much internet. Those 4 letters just don't belong together if you've spent that much time on 4chan. What I was talking about was beer. Yes, that's what I was talking about. So they have this phenomenal app where they have all the different beer styles, and it is perfect because one, they even have a color chart. So if you wanted to, and you weren't on an S7 because that screen has such weird color accuracy, Samsung, why'd you do this to us? What you could do is you can actually compare the beer in your glass to the color chart to actually get the coloring that the BJCP would look for, and look at their standards that way. And I think that's cool as shit.
I just make sure you're using the most up-to-date version when you're kind of doing the stuff. Not that things update too regularly. Like usually the minutia between year to year for what they update is like nothing. Like they might change the SRM, which is the color of a beer, by like a couple points. But aside from that, there's whatever you're learning from like 2011 is probably the same thing you're learning today, with again minor exceptions. But yeah, no, absolutely, I'd recommend, especially if you plan on looking into this kind of stuff, absolutely give that a look through.
So now that you brought it up, Joe, I gotta ask: are you a BJCP certified judge?
I am not, but I would like to be.
Gasp. Methinks now that we phoenixed this podcast back into existence, we should put that out there as an named. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe the fact that you're Malted Joe and I'm Salted Matt. It doesn't matter. I've ruined this whole bit. The point is, do you want to go into a challenge and see who can get the highest score on the BJCP?
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it'd be you. I'm fairly convinced that you can do better because my beer knowledge has been lacking in the amount of time I've spent in wine and poverty recently. So
same.
So I think it'll be interesting to go, and now that we've both kind of settled in at least a little bit life-wise, it may be worthwhile to go and have this friendly competition. What do you say?
Oh yeah, no, I think that'd be a bunch of fun.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. The Matt versus Joe beer judging competition begins now. All right. That was my announcer voice. I mean, Ted, the announcer, who I keep locked in my closet.
Is that just your roommate?
Nah, he's working.
Oh, okay. That's good.
All right. So trapped Stockholm Syndrome situations aside, you want to jump into our regularly scheduled content?
We probably should.
All right. Where do you want to start? Because we've got a couple of different things on the docket. We've covered what we're drinking. Do you want to talk about the weird beer of this week? All right. So I want to talk about a beer that shouldn't exist. In fact, I'm upset that I found out about it, and I'm happy that I couldn't find pictures of it. So I'm talking about the Stablecraft Brewing Cumuli Nimbi. Now, Joe, when I say that name, that beautiful Latin name, Cumuli Nimbi, what do you think about?
Not what this beer description says.
Yeah.
I know, but
yeah, but hold on. Before we spoil the surprise, chat. If you're out there, what do you think the name Cumuli Nimbi means as a beer? Like, if you had to guess that name as a beer flavor profile without Googling it, I mean, you could Google it and spoil the fun. But if you just had to, like, off the cuff,
don't worry, we'll post it.
Yeah, it's nightmare.
If I had to take a guess, right, I would say somebody decided to use cotton candy and or marshmallows in some sort of like pastry stout, where it'll be like a chocolatey candy kind of hodgepodge of different way too sweet things. That's what I would think.
Yeah, I would think that's very reasonable. So the question then is, if I had to pick an answer to that, I would guess, if I had to be honest, I would guess it's one of those like weird galaxy beers that they now serve, where it's like full of all sorts of random ass bullshit, like sparkles and it's purple. I don't know. It's served with whipped cream, some nonsense.
That's
So
shit.
I'll
Sparkles and it's
I'll go ahead and put this in the chat so you guys can see it. Just because I feel like it's important to share this nightmare with you all.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, everybody. You don't need to be exposed to this.
So, the Cumuli Nimbi. No, it's not Galaxy Bagels. The Galaxy Bagels are also an affront to humanity. As a Jew, they offend me. It is a Doritos and Mountain Dew beer. Allow me to repeat myself. Because there is no God. The Cumuli Nimbi is a Galaxy Bagel beer. Nope, just kidding. It's Mountain Dew and Doritos.
As an American, this also offends me.
I'm barely considered a human, and this offends me.
It's dark times. Dark times.
Like, I realize that there's gimmicks. I realize that there's joke beers. But somebody made this. Somebody took a fucking investment. Somebody put millions of dollars, or at least more than $1 million, into a brewery and hired people and had an impact on the community. And they took that and they made a Cool Ranch and Mountain Dew fucking beer.
I think, you know what I think pisses me off more than anything else? The fact that they had the audacity to dry hop it. like thinking, oh, that'll finish, that'll fix it, you know, like, oh yeah, like, absolutely, dry hopping it, no, it's fine now.
That requires a special level of fuck you, doesn't it?
It's not just like they just threw in one kind of hop. They did El Dorado, Montueca, Citra, and then they added Mosaic lupulin powder into it.
Wait,
like,
why did they add Mosaic lupulin powder? Why?
Because number one, using straight up lupulin powder is a big thing now. I mean, it gives you a lot of the alpha acids without needing to like get fucked on like pellets and shit. So like it makes sense. But for dry hopping this, I mean, I don't know. I personally wouldn't dry hop with lupulin powder in the first place. That's just my own personal preference. I know some people do. However, yeah, it really is just a cause fuck you. That's why. That's why they did all this.
So
this isn't even like a case of the what did they call it? The haterade beer, where that was a beer. I think it was a Ghost that they made with fruit punch. That actually turned out good.
So yeah, that's our weird beer of the week. And you know what, Comfy Con? That's an admirable life goal. To want to try all of the worst beers is admirable. Now the problem is Joe hasn't started brewing his shit yet.
Knew it was coming.
I'm sorry, Joe.
Oh, it's fine.
It was right there. It was.
Well, now we have this, right? So you and I have accepted the challenge to go and do the judging together. So, I think our guest host, who's occasionally on here, is now officially going to have to go on the journey of having some of the worst beers that this country has to offer. I'll pay for them. I will pay for them. Just so you can show up on this podcast and tell us precisely what you think.
Yeah, you know what? I'm willing to send you like a guest reporter to Compton on a trip to taste all of the worst beers in America. I will sponsor this. ComfyCon, I will pay not good money, slightly below average money, which is the going rate for your particular set of skills, to go and try. Wow, why am I being such a dick today? I gotta take a step back. I'm sorry, Comfy Con. That was rude. And I'm sorry, Joe. That was also rude. You make good beer. Acceptable beer. Usually. But either way, independent of my moment of emotional crisis, I want to see you try all of the worst beers in America. The question then begins, what are the worst beers in America? Actually, you know what? Lyrics, if this takes off, you can be our worst beers of Europe correspondent. I'm down.
Sorry,
Joe's roboting. I think he just be booped out that his internet connection is terrible. Hold on.
All right, it should be back.
Okay. Comfy Cotton, how do you drink beer with soap in it? Oh, I remember this story.
Okay, good. I was about to say we have a story for that.
Hold on.
Yes.
We've told the story before.
Yes.
I want to latch onto a more important thing that just popped up in chat. Sorry, not to be dismissive, but Lyric said that he already knows the worst beer of Germany.
Oh,
And I need to know now.
yeah,
What is the worst beer of Germany? I'm normally the one calling people out. This is such a weird position to be in. Why am I in the back seat of talking trash? Lyrics, drop the knowledge in the chat. What is the worst beer of Germany?
Yeah, I'm definitely down to hear this.
Yeah. And while he has a chance to type that out, I want to poll you, Joe.
Oh boy.
So what do you think would make the list for the worst beer in America? Let's assume that we're not gonna throw in like the ice houses of the world, or like or be typical beer snobs and talk shit about Budweiser. If we had to give it the honest run and have to pick like worst beer in America, what would you choose?
Now, are we talking? Because like I personally think there's a difference between a bad beer that's trying to be a good beer and a bad beer that's like it's like that B movie category. When like when you know they're trying to be a B movie and it doesn't work. And then there are the movies that happen to be like glorious B movies. Like I think there's a difference when it comes to shitty beer where it's like we actively were trying to make a shitty beer and like hey, this just happened to turn out to be a shitty beer.
That just sounds a lot like the excuses we make for why we drink Rolling Rock.
It was cheap. No, but I would say for an experimental beer that I had that was probably up there for shittiest beers I've ever had was one of the experimental beers I tried at one of my former employers' places. It was a brewery I used to work for, where they made me try one of their black dirt onion beers. Turned out about as well as you'd all think. I believe I was cited saying it tasted like Shrek's asshole. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Aside from that, though, I'm trying to think about worst beers that I've had. Like the worst beer that, like in America, that I've had that I can kind of cite.
Want me to throw out a really controversial option?
I was actually going to throw out one, and then you can throw out yours. No, it wasn't made with actual dirt. I would know.
Would you though?
That yes. Fun side story for everybody in the chat and anybody who potentially might be listening in the future. Back when I was studying to be an archaeologist, I was forced to eat dirt in one of my classes, so I know what dirt tastes like. But being aside from the point, that Rogue Sriracha beer, I was not a fan. I thought it was gimmicky for the sake of being gimmicky, and it didn't work. Also, yes, that Pearl Street Black IPA was bad, but I think it was just bad because they don't know any better. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't the worst. That was just, you made some classic mistakes bad. Whereas I think, like, this Rogue Sriracha beer was bad because they were trying to be like, hey, Sriracha's a big thing right now. And it just didn't work. If they would have taken some time to actually, like, develop it properly, I'm sure you could make a great beer that has Sriracha elements to it. Like, there's a lot of potential there. It's just, they literally just made, I forget what style of beer it is because it's just so overwhelmingly like, here, we just dumped a fuck ton of peppers in here, like, fuck you. But yeah, that would be one of my picks. I don't know about the worst, but it's up there.
So the Rogue Sriracha Hot Stout was what they made. They made a stout with Sriracha.
Yes.
So here's my... I think it's going to be a properly contentious option for the worst beer in America.
Okay.
My vote goes to the New Belgium Brewing Fat Tire.
Really? Interesting. Okay.
And here's why. So the Fat Tire is meant to compete with the kind of Sam Adams, like, accessible craft beer space bar orders, right? It's mass produced, it's everywhere, it's very accessible. And one of its selling points, at least in theory, is that it's, well, Belgian style.
Uh-huh.
The thing is, it's an affront to all Belgian beer, I think. The hop profile, totally off. The malts, ridiculous. It comes off as a drunk American reading about what a Belgian beer looks like in Swahili, then asking a Thai man who doesn't speak English but does speak Swahili for some reason to translate it for him in Thai, and having a Japanese man who doesn't speak English but does speak Thai to translate into Japanese, and then once it comes full circle back into English, he accidentally loses the recipe in the fire and makes it up on the spot.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely controversial. I don't think it's that bad of a beer. I mean, if we're going to go off of what you said about it being a Belgian, I would have to say it has some Belgian elements to it, but I would agree with you. Overall, if you were to put that into a competition, it would not win any awards for being a Belgian or, a good beer. But I still think it's an okay beer. For like a flagship beer for a, moderately sized brewery. Like, there are worse out there.
There are. But the reason I highlight them in particular is that, to me, Fat Tire represents sort of a detachment from caring about beer. Where, I mean, I'm on their website, and here's exactly how they describe their flavor profile. I quote, Fat Tire's unique flavor profile originates from the late 1930s, when local Belgian breweries aimed to satisfy the tastes of visiting British soldiers. English floral hops, subtle malt sweetness, and spicy fruity notes from the Belgian yeast made for a balanced yet magical combination. These same characteristics are at the heart of Fat Tire. Classified as an Ameribelgo-style ale by the revered Great American Beer Festival and the World Beer Cup competitions, Fat Tire blends a fine malt presence, fresh herbal hop balance, and a touch of fruity yeast to offer drinkers everywhere a timeless craft beer experience with a rare blend of balance and complexity. So they basically went and read in a book somewhere that some Belgians tried to make some beer for some Brits, and then they tried to copy it. And they did it in such a way where the Great American Beer Festival had to make up a whole new genre of beer so that they could feel special. This is like the 51st place trophy equivalent of beer styles. It's unacceptable, I say. Unacceptable. Especially compared to how much I love Belgian-style ales and how much flavor they have to them. How much that amazing floral hop presence just hits the palate. New Belgium's Fat Tire, and let me be clear, New Belgium makes very good beer. I'm a big fan of a lot of their stuff. I just think their flagship beer is bad. And I think, more importantly, it's representative of an endemic problem, especially in craft brewing, where in trying to create something new, people will go and dig up some ancient history and then fuck it up to such an extent that whatever they made at the end isn't worth the squeeze. It's like the juice IPA joke, where the juice was not worth the squeeze. I don't know. I do want to halt my rant for a second to point out, Lyrics did in fact answer our question. The worst beer in Germany is called Oettinger, and it's just it's the Rolling Rock of Germany. It's cheap, and it's simply bad in comparison, even for a person that doesn't really like beer. So said Lyrics, and honestly, I could see that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate ComfyCon now that I'm looking at the chat for backing me up. Though she brings up a really good point, which is that, you know, Fat Tire is in a lot of ways like, you know, beer for people who can't tell the difference between good beer and not great beer. But sometimes you're just in the mood for not great beer.
No, I 100% feel the both of you on this one.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things where, you know, they're situationally. Like, I have right now, because one of my roommates, I don't remember if they had this case of beer from before or if there was a party planned or what, but they left me an entire case of Natty Light. And that is not a beer I would normally want, as we would all probably. But every now and again, sometimes you're just in the mood for a shitty beer.
It's true. Though in the case of Natty Light, I would argue sometimes you're just in the mood for some seltzer water.
It's true. Usually I'll take a shot of whiskey and I'll drop it in there. That way I can actually get a little something out of it. And I'm not even kidding.
No. I'm laughing not because of Boilermakers, because I love Boilermakers. But there was a thread on Ask Reddit today, which was they were asking the bartenders of Reddit, what do drinks say about the person who's ordering them?
Yeah.
And I was scrolling through just trying to see what the orders I put in normally kind of say about me. Luckily, nobody had anything especially negative to say about Negronis, other than I'm a pompous asshole and I deserve to die, but I already knew that. But the thing that caught my eye was there was, like, I want to say it was 2 sentences, and it just said, Boilermaker, 100% an alcoholic. And they had like 10,000 upvotes. Just no elaboration. Just Boilermaker, definitely an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And suddenly I had this college flashback where we're sitting in Kyle's apartment and I'm insisting that the Rolling Rock be cut with some of the bourbon. I think it was Heaven's Hill, or no, Four Roses. Cut with the Four Roses, because how could we pregame properly without the Boilermaker experience? Now, I was the only one who went ham on the Boilermakers, but I walked away from that with a very fond memory of Boilermakers, and I like them, and I still make them to this day. And to suddenly be called an alcoholic by both Reddit and now you, ComfyCon, right in the heart. Just killing me. Pain. That is my life now. Straight pain.
It's actually really funny. Speaking of alcoholism, last night I was playing D&D with the group that I play with where I'm a PC, as was the other group I play with, where I'm the GM, and they were talking to me about my drinking during when we play, because I said, oh, I always say like, oh, let me go get myself a drink and then we'll get started. And so one of the players, all of them are, aside from my one buddy, Nate, are psych majors, or were psych majors at one point in time. And so one of them was like, hey, I'm gonna pull out the DSM-5, and we're just gonna kind of go down the list, man. And we're gonna see if how many of these things you check off on when it comes
Oh
to
my
the
God.
alcoholism tab.
Oh my God.
It was fun. I'll say that much.
So now I have to ask, because you're down in South Carolina now, right?
Yes.
So this is a virtual game you were playing.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know our old friend Paul Mormon, not to out him, but I think he still plays. And sorry, I just saw lyrics saying that he just ordered $100 of alcohol while we were talking about alcoholics. First of all, $100, that's Bush League, my friend. Bush League. Get on our level. Second of all, Comfy Con's obsession with the DSM is now spreading, because she's now very excited about how you were diagnosed officially as an alcoholic.
Okay, if you want my quick story on that,
Yes,
before we
please.
continue with the Paul Mormon stuff. Apparently, with the DSM-5, you only need to check off 2 boxes for being diagnosed as an alcoholic, but there's like 10 different questions, so it is incredibly easy to overdiagnose. That being said, yeah.
Look, man, I first of all, I'm in no position to judge you. I mean, you visited. You saw what happens.
Yeah. I just think there's a distinct difference between being an alcoholic and being involved in, the industry. And I mean, I can't comment on the 5, but look, they had a whole conversation on that. Next time, I'm playing, I'll make sure that you jump in to have this conversation. They would appreciate it.
I mean, if you want me to browbeat them into understanding the difference between being passionate about alcohol, for lack of a better word, versus being passionate about being drunk.
Oh no, they were doing it just out of humor.
Okay.
They were not judging me, but they thought it would be a fun exercise.
Gotcha. I'm suddenly taken back to so I was having a really good conversation with somebody about booze, and they were giving me shit. I just realized that this is going to turn into a self-aggrandizing story. So let me remind the audience before I start, mentioning how clever I am, that I did in fact spill beer all over my room before this podcast started. And everything is sticky, and I have regrets. But I need to preface this with something, just so that I can go back to patting myself on the back. And we were talking, and they asked me what I drank, and I rattled off my favorites. And they were like, wait, you're Russian. Why don't you drink vodka? And I looked at them, I was like, look, Russians don't like vodka. They like being drunk, and vodka is the shortcut to that. Russians ain't picky, right? Alcoholism is from point A to point B as fast as possible. Preferably alone, and preferably with no interruptions. It's about being drunk. It's not about what you're drinking. And I think that's the important distinction that often gets lost in even the jokes about, oh, well, you like alcohol so much, you must be an alcoholic, haha. I think it's this weird space where people don't quite realize or quite can't tread the line the same about alcohol as a hobby versus alcohol as a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's enough ranting from my side about that. Though, I do want to ask, because Has your living situation changed at all? Are you still with the same roommates?
Yeah, until the end of the month. And then I am in a new apartment, which is actually, not to bore our listeners who know nothing about Columbia, South Carolina, but actually going to be right off at the riverfront. I'm at a little apartment complex called Canalside.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, no.
Solo or with roommates again?
We're it's gonna be me, obviously, Comfy's coming on down, and then we're gonna have a roommate. Yeah,
Okay, sweet. I'm assuming you guys are gonna have the cats come down with you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's actually really nice because it's like a block or two away from the Vista, so it's like walking distance.
You lucky son of a bitch. Okay. So the reason I asked is, how are you on internet right now? Because if I remember correctly, you had no internet for a very long
Yeah.
time.
So the situation was that the all of the internet hookups are in the living room in my current living situation. So my computer is set up. Literally, I will see if I can take a picture and post it in the chat or do something. But I'm literally set up on like the kitchen island. Like my monitor is like right in front of the sink on the countertop, and I sit on a bar stool,
Nice.
and my computer is directly hooked up to the router that's like across the room. So yeah, no, that's kind of how I fixed that. Is I talked to my roommates about it, and I was like, I'm just gonna set up in the living room.
So the question is now, are your roommates around or are they out trolling?
Yeah. Well, my one roommate's here. Whatchamacallit. I think she actually just went upstairs to go to bed, and the other one is still in and out. She lives in Charleston now, but she still has some stuff here, and she periodically comes back and forth.
Okay. Now, the one last thing I have to ask is, do you have AC?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's super useful.
I hate you.
Oh,
Summer
you
hit
guys-
Summer hit California hard, and all we've got is fans. If you hear a buzzing noise or like fuzz on my side, it's 100% because I have as many fans pointed at me as I can right now.
Yeah, I don't hear any of that, but yeah, no. See, we have. If you remember how people in South Carolina like to keep their AC, we have our AC like blasting inside. So outside, it ranges anywhere from like mid 90s to like low 100s over the course of the day. But inside, it is a nice, crisp 73.
I'm so jealous. It's still in the 80s. It's 8 o'clock in the evening, and it is still in the 80s. I want no part of this.
All right, good. Good night, Comfy.
All right, Comfy. It was a pleasure having you in chat. Thanks so much for coming around. Okay, I can try to keep my mic away from the buzzing, or just point all of the fans at my nuts.
I mean, it's not that bad, at least on my end. I mean, they're saying he's hearing a slight buzzing, but hopefully it's not on everybody else's end.
Yeah, I mean, I timed my my mic switch somewhat poorly, so I recently got like an actual microphone as opposed to the headset that I've been using previously. And
Okay.
and I think the improvement in quality might have come at a poor time, just because I got fans for days,
You'll
and
have
everything
to,
is pointing.
You'll have to whatchamacallit, to send me what kind of mic you got or ended up getting, because I'm actually once I move, I'm looking at potentially getting like a proper setup for the podcast and everything.
Yeah. Hold on, lyrics. You say you're complaining on a high level. Oh, do you mean just that there's a buzzing that you notice from the stream? Because I could kind of get that. For a second though, I read that as you had some gripes, and I'm not gonna lie. As a man with many gripes, I was intrigued, but now I realize that you're probably just commenting on the microphone situation. But As I was, as the new mic is just one of those like blue snowballs. It's nothing fancy.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking into. Just something like that, and just kind of having the whatchamacallit, the vice grip attached to the table and everything.
I'm not gonna lie. I have it by the tripod, and I'm just waving one hand around as I hold it up to my mouth with the other.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, it's very satisfying this way because I can be somewhat emphatic with it as well. So I can move both my hands around, and I'm hoping it's not noticeable on the
No,
stream. But I gotta say,
here.
it's very satisfying because it's got a good heft to it. It feels like I'm waving around like a tiny mace. I'm just angrily waving it around as I talk.
You know, my goal, not to derail us here any further than we've been derailed the entire night, but
Meh.
my goal is to get a webcam and that mic in particular, and then have because we're gonna have not this this upcoming year, but hopefully beyond that, we're gonna have a like a spare room. So we were both actually thinking about putting our streaming setups in that spare room, and then just kind of making it like a gaming slash streaming room.
You know what'd be cool? I'm just gonna brainstorm out loud for a hot second, just because I think this would be a fun thing to do.
Sure.
We should set up webcams and the setup to make it seem like we're across the table from each other, or like put it on an axis so the camera's on the off angle so we can mirror it.
Hmm.
And so that way, even though we're on opposite coasts, it'll be like we're sitting right next to each other.
That would actually be pretty cool. We should look into this once we have time, and once I'm moved into my new place. We'll look into this. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Let's actually get into scheduled content because we talked about the weird beer of the week. Quite happy with that conversation. Once again, Cool Ranch Doritos and Mountain Dew beer is an abomination. Why did you do this to us? Why? Um, and now I'm gonna go to you for the next segment, mostly because I've been talking a lot, and
Fine.
I want you to throw out because you ran this by me, and I think it's really fascinating. So you have a recipe of the week specifically for brewing, not even for food. For brewing that I think is really interesting, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
So, this week I ended up finding a recipe for a Lithuanian style beer, which is it's interesting. I'm going to type it into chat, the name, just so people can kind of look into it themselves. But I think some of the more fascinating parts about this beer, kept innis. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce it. But the point being is that the mash itself, so all of the grain that you're using in this beer is actually baked. Like the article I was reading, they took like actual bread pans and they just filled them with the mash, like mixed it all together, made it so that it was like an even consistency with everything that they were using, and then just threw it into an oven at like 400 degrees, like legit baked it. And when they pulled it out, parts of the top were actually like smoldering, like they actually like toasted the top to the point of like almost slightly burning it. And then they let that cool, and like you could actually see like all of the sugars from the grain coming out and like caramelizing, and it was super cool. And apparently a lot of that comes through later on in the process. Like the finish is supposed to be very toffee, very caramelly because of that. um, but I also think like the rest of the process is absolutely fascinating because they so then mash is pulled out like that. They let it cool, then they break it up because of how the proteins kind of bind. So it kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of congeals a little bit. So it actually is almost like a bread. Um, and so they actually have to like take out knives and whatnot and like break it up into chunks again. And then once they break it up, they put it back into a pot with a strainer at the bottom. And then instead of using like warm water like you would with the wort typically when you're making beer, they actually put cold water through it, which I thought was fascinating. Apparently, it brings out a lot more of those like darker flavors, a lot more of those bitter flavors without um, because I mean at this point in time you really don't need to reboil something that's already baked in this level. A lot of the essential bits, for lack of better, terms and whatnot, are already out there. Part of that caramelization took out some of the sugars and the proteins that you need. Um, so you really could just put a cold water through it, and that's what they do. And it comes out this like very rich, almost like if you ever homebrew and you use extract, it looks very much like an extract. And then to wrap it all up, they actually, while all of this is going on, are making what they call hop tea. So the hops are completely boiled and done in their own separate like pot. And then at the very end, when they all go into the fermenter together, is the only time that they're mixed. And then that sits. That sits for a good long time. And then they crack that open, and it honestly looked phenomenal. And it's something where I would love to get a chance to try that. I mean, I would love to get it in its own context first, so I would know what it tastes like before doing it on my own, but I would love to try to make it too.
So I'm looking at. I wonder if Lithuanian as a language is anything like Russian, just because the kepti part, the kipti, so kiptet in Russian means to boil something, kiptit, or like to bring something to a boil, because like Russian is an interesting language, and I'm gonna guess that Lithuanian shares this particular quirk, where in Russian there's a unique word for boiling water, or water that has reached a boiling point, and that's kipitok. So I wonder whether Lithuanian shares that, and that's sort of part of the inspiration for how this all works. Because in the image that I put into chat, or not into chat, into the page, I actually OBS'd properly and transitioned the pages.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see the man stirring with a wooden spoon, and I wonder if that has anything to do with the boiling water or the boiling side of the hops tea, and whether that's maybe the foundational element of the beer, where they're looking at it from the perspective of they're flavoring a hop tea with malt as opposed to flavoring malt with hop tea.
Yeah, I honestly I don't know, but I think it's fascinating. I don't know, just getting to see people brew in a very traditional way is always, I don't know, it's always interesting. Just to kind of think like almost every culture has figured out how to make alcohol in some way, shape, or form, but we all do it in such different ways.
It's true. But that I don't know, that's the thing that I think is most beautiful about humanity. When in doubt, humanity knows how to get fucked up, and they know how to do a beautiful job of getting you there.
I mean, and it's not just humanity too, which is I think the most I don't know, very interesting part. Is, even higher primates know how to get fucked up. They know what plants are gonna get them drunk and what plants are gonna get them high. So, it's something that's kind of carried over for us, since before we were human. It's actually
true.
a really good thing if anybody's any interested. Pat McGovern, he's a big archaeologist, did a whole series of books on the arts of wine and beer from their traditional and historical aspects.
In
Highly
fact, co-author of Ancient Ales, if I remember correctly.
yes, yes, he is. No, really, really interesting guy. And he does a very good job of writing about archaeology without making it dry. So would highly recommend it. You can definitely find his books on Amazon. But but yeah, no, absolutely thought that this was a great and interesting, excuse me, beer style that I would like to share with everybody. Um, just because it's not really something that you see too often. Like this past week was the only time that I really ever heard of this. Um, so yeah, no, I figure here we are.
Yeah. Another thing I want to add, just because I'm looking at this image now.
Uh-huh.
I like that he's stirring the mash, as that's what this is an image of, with a wooden stick. Specifically, just because I like the idea of, because that looks like raw wood to me. The idea of having a potentially woody flavor introduced, just from the implement alone, just sounds really cool to me.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think in that picture in particular, he's using it mostly to check water level. But like, yeah, no, I mean, I've always been like a big fan of having like raw wood staves in your beer, especially if you're going to do like a mock um, barrel aging. If you want to do like a mock barrel aging without actually having to age something in a barrel for a year or 6 months or however long, a great way to do that is to subject your beer to beer staves during like the mash process and then actually during the boil and then potentially like quote unquote dry hopping with it later as an additive.
Oh, I'll throw in another pro tip for anyone who cares. One cool thing that you can do nowadays is they sell White Dog, which is the distilled spirit. That's the base of a lot of whiskey. In fact, that's what the base of whiskey is called. You can take that and you can buy oak staves and you can toast them and or char them and you can age the White Dog on those staves and watch it as it colors over time. It is one of the coolest things you can do, and a 10 out of 10 recommendation from your friend Matt, the snob.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a fun activity for anybody who feels like making their own char quality whiskey. Definitely give it a shot.
Absolutely. In fact, once I'm done with this massive batch of orangello and limoncello that I'm making,
Uh-huh.
I think I might just go ahead and do that, and then that'll be a good Instagram-worthy documentation of what we were thinking about making.
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad call at all. I know in particular I have a mini barrel that I'm still trying to figure out what I want to put in there to kind of give it that initial flavor. Because I'm incredibly tempted because it's about the size of 3 wine bottles, like 3 750 milliliter wine bottles.
Blend your own whiskey to it.
So that was one of my thoughts. One of my thoughts was doing a bourbon blend actually, and aging it in there. Another thought was just because of how at least recently I've been into port aged things. I was thinking about just getting a really nice port or a lot of port, either way, and then just filling this barrel up with it and just letting it sit and do its thing.
That would be... Actually, you should do that. Though, I will warn you now, port is unfortunately expensive.
Yeah, that was the reason why it hasn't been done yet.
But if you do that, then you have a perfect port barrel to age stuff in.
Oh yeah. And then it's something that, I mean, you can get a lot of mileage out of a barrel as long as you don't mess with it too much. So I'm hoping I can get a couple batches out of this one. So we'll see.
I'm just thinking now about a port barrel aged blackberry mellow.
Hmm.
Oh my god, that sounds so good.
Oh yeah.
Please do this.
Oh,
For my honor and my dignity, what little of there is left of it.
I'm not only am I going to do that, but I will remind me later. I will find 'cause I have a receipt for the barrel. I will absolutely send you the details on it. That way, if you're ever inclined, because I did not spend a lot of money on this, you can absolutely get one of your own. And it's a really nice countertop centerpiece if you want to use that for that when it's not actually holding any liquids. Looks pretty
Joe,
nice. It's got a little.
you've seen my apartment. I have no more room for centerpieces.
I know. It's mostly for the audience.
Oh shit, sorry. Yes, Joe, I have so much space for centerpieces. I shall display it proudly upon my mantelpiece.
But it's nice because they come with a they're pre-tapped, so all you have to do is just finagle around with the tap a bit, and then it'll just instantly start pouring straight out of there. But when it's not in use for that, it's airtight, so nothing theoretically should go in or go out. I mean, obviously, a little bit of liquid and other things are going to come in and out. But that's chemistry for another time.
Neat. I will look into it.
Yeah, let's I guess let's move on to the next topic. Do you want me to keep going? Because I am definitely down to do the ingredients that I was looking into this past week.
Yeah, let's do that. I'll round this off with my segment at the end.
All right. So, this week I was looking into the difference and also kind of similarities between three different invasive species that are all related in the US. So, these three in particular, and there's plenty more. Like, if I remember correctly looking into this, there's about anywhere from 8 to 12 of like invasive raspberry and blackberry species in the US. And most of them come from like Southeast and East Asia and a bunch of other places.
Hold on, invasive raspberries?
Yeah, yeah.
Can they
yeah.
please invade my mouth with their deliciousness? That sounds awesome.
Oh yeah. Actually, when you were living over on the East Coast, South Carolina is actually a host to a bunch of invasive raspberry species.
Dude, we fucked up. We should have collected a shit ton of those.
Remember when we lived together, when we lived at house? Remember when we would walk down that one strip and I kept mentioning how there were raspberries that were growing on the road? Over by the Mormon church?
Yeah, I would eat them all the time.
Those are dewberries. Those are an invasive species.
They were good.
Hmm. So that's kind of my point, though, is that there are a lot of invasive species that are very related, but also distinctly different from a lot of things that we see every day. Unfortunately, I know from an FDA perspective, a lot of these things can't be used in brewing, but that's not to say home brewing it's not allowed, and it's not to say that you can't cook with them. Actually, one of my favorites is the wineberry. So wineberries, I'll link this to you so you can put it in chat if you feel like it.
Hell yeah.
I am lazy. Wineberries are probably my favorite, mostly because wineberries grow very well up in southern New York, where I spent a lot of time. And the house that I was living in when I was growing up there, like the entire woods was just flanked by wine berries. And like right around like this time of year, so like anywhere from like June, late May to like mid July, these things were just popping off. Like just constant supply of new wine berries. And you had to beat all of the birds and all of the fun animals to getting these things because they're so goddamn delicious. Like I like me some raspberry. Raspberries are one of my favorite fruits. These things are on a whole nother level. They're like they're like if you took all of the best parts of raspberries and like the sweetness of blackberries and you just cranked both of them up. So you got like the fun tart elements of a raspberry with like that nice sweet undertone, but like also that like almost syrupy sweetness that you get with like a blackberry that's also kind of got that crisp pop to it. All of that can be found in a wineberry. And
I gotta say, they
honestly,
look quite threatening, though.
they're special. So wineberries, when you're actually going to go pick a wineberry, you have to be very careful because the center is actually you can't pick that part off. Like you shouldn't pick that part off. You're actually pulling off like almost kind of like a clump of berries around a centerpiece, and you're just trying to like rip the berries off. Now there are a lot of thorns and like prickly bits to a wineberry bush. You just kind of have to know how to approach it. But I will say this: if you were looking for one of the best damn pies, like ever,
A wineberry pie?
wineberry apple.
Wineberry apple.
Yes. You don't use too much apple. You use like I would say if I had to give like percentages, like 80% wineberry, like 20% apple. Cuz like that especially if you pick a tart apple for this to play off of the already tart element to the wineberry, it's just the wineberry when baked loses at least a good chunk of that tartness to it, and that's one of my favorite parts of it. So when you throw in a tart apple for like the pie, it really kind of brings that back out.
Sliced or chunked?
I like to in this scenario, I like to do it chunked. Now, I think you can do slices if you're going to do like almost like a ring of slices on the top as opposed to doing a crust. Totally acceptable. See where I'm coming from?
I'm just looking at them and I'm reminded of all the random ass wild berries I've eaten as a child and as an adult. And I'm thinking about how good it would be in a pie. And I love me berry pie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not very good at making pies these days. But I get what you mean. Honestly, I'm more stuck on an earlier point that you made that I don't get. Why would the FDA give a shit what manner of odd berry you put in your alcoholic brew?
So, without going too much into a rant about this, because this is something I can rant about for an entire podcast. So the FDA gives a lot of shits. The FDA really wants to have it so that there are as few instances as possible of somebody being able to get sick or sued.
That makes sense.
Because wine berries aren't a typical cultivated fruit, can't use them.
Gotcha. Hold on real quick, just because I spotted it in chat. Lyrics, thank you so much. Have a good evening. Looking forward to catching you on the next one. Thanks again for participating and joining us in this weird-ass romp.
Always good to have you.
So let's go back.
Yes.
Because I still don't get this.
Uh-huh.
The fuck kind of difference does it make what kind of weird-ass berry you put in if it's edible, right? Like, what Monsanto lobby do I have to appeal to in order to get my goddamn wine berries as an adjunct? Or do I have to cultivate them myself in an FDA-approved farm?
So, there are ways around. Obviously, like, some people kind of find ways to get past this. One of the big examples is up in the Buffalo area, loganberries. Buffalonians love berries. If anybody has not had loganberries, who's listening to the podcast, loganberries are another subsection of wild raspberries and blackberries in the U.S., which are in fact an invasive species. If I remember correctly, loganberries are closer related to blackberries, though, although they still maintain a red coloration.
I could have sworn on a previous podcast we actually sat down and looked up loganberries, and I could have sworn that some dude bred them from an invasive species, some asshole named Logan.
Potentially. But yes, they are still, if I remember correctly, still technically considered partially invasive. But actually, no, I'm looking at it right now. It says they are in fact cultivated commercially. But that's kind of how certain groups get around it, is that, like, honestly, I think that a lot of these, like, sub-cultivars and whatnot are easily accessible. Like, I'm sure if you actually petitioned to the FDA and said, like, hey, look, I have my own garden, like, attached to the brewery. We hire somebody who comes out here to take care of the wine berries. Like, here is the list of things that we spray on them, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you could get it passed. It would be a headache and a half, but I'm sure you could get it passed.
I just fell down an interesting rabbit hole.
Uh-huh.
So, blackberries and raspberries both belong to the same order of flowering plants as roses.
Yep.
Which begs the question, not to derail this conversation too badly,
No, you're fine.
why nobody has made a rosehip raspberry and blackberry beer, wine, whatever.
I don't know.
I just found out that apparently cannabis is also part of the rose family.
Is it? And that means hops are closely related to them.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, so Cannabaceae is the family, Rosalis is the order, and Rosids is the clade. For those who care about the growing of plants. But yeah, suddenly, keeping it in the family makes a lot more sense. Also, apparently a boysenberry is actually a loganberry mixed with a raspberry mixed with a blackberry.
Yep. A lot of inbreeding.
And apparently the Olali berry, which I've never heard of, is
never.
a black loganberry mixed with a young berry. And young berries are a mix of raspberries, blackberries, and dewberries. So there's a weird, delicious, incestuous combination that's going on within the Rosid family.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Rosacea family, I should say.
Surprisingly enough, not a lot of wineberry crossovers. It's fine. They're only my favorite.
Well, young berries. Young berries are... No, actually, no, those are dewberries. I can't Wikipedia fast enough for this.
It's fine. The point being is...
The point being is, shit looks delicious. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm not gonna lie, I think we're very, very overdue for coordinating a trip to go pick a metric fuck ton of wineberries in the forests of New York.
I'm totally down. We just have to. I mean, obviously, I think we're kind of getting a little bit late into the season this year, but we'll have to find a time. I mean, I'm absolutely positive we could go and do that. There's plenty, like bushels upon bushels, that exist in the woods of where I used to live, and my mom still owns the house, so we could absolutely go and do that.
So you said the season for wineberries starts in the summer, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, let's aim for eventually. I was gonna say next summer, but who the fuck knows, right?
Eventually, yes. Yeah, no, I feel you on that, but definitely something I would love to do.
No,
And
no, go ahead.
oh yeah, I was gonna say, and if we can attempt to make a beer, wine, mead out of it, great. I'm definitely going to, once we do this, make you the wine berry and apple pie that I do. 'Cause it is just, I don't know. I'm not normally too, you know, full of myself when it comes to a handful of things. This is one of those things, though. This is one of those things that I take a lot of pride in. I can definitely make a mean wine berry and apple pie.
I will take
It
you up
almost-
on that.
It almost sounds like one of those like hill people, mountain folk kind of old family recipe kind of things.
Because it
you
is
know,
one of those.
Yeah, I was about to say because it kind of is because I grew up in like the goddamn Catskills, so yeah, kind of is a little bit.
You is hill people, Joe.
Except I can take full responsibility and full credit for it. I came up with the entire whole 9 yards all on my own. Nobody taught me how to make that pie.
But Joe, you've been part of the hill people family the whole time.
This whole time.
This whole time, indeed. Actually, before we transition to our last segment of the evening, I have an important question. Perhaps the most important question.
Mm-hmm.
Pie crust, lard, butter, blend.
That's a very good question.
Hopefully the South hasn't ruined you. Because I have an immediate answer to this question. I just wanted to know what you do.
Personally, I'm going to give you a little context here. Because my family was never a lard family. Like, lard and, just typical, like, fats of that nature were not usually used in any sort of our cooking. But I would probably say that I would use mostly butter for my pie crust.
You chose correctly. Yeah. I'm a big fan of butter crusts, personally. And I feel like it's weirdly contentious. And I don't know
that's fine.
why.
That's
'Cause
why I
I-
said like mostly butter, because like I could see using like a little bit of like lard to kind of accentuate it depending on what kind of pie you're using. I can't see doing like a full lard, for your fat.
The only thing I'll say in favor of lard is that it's really good for like a more savory galette. Like if you ever want to make a free-form pastry, pro tip, some goat cheese and some pre-cooked Italian sausage with some balsamic vinegar when you're done will make
Delicious.
you potentially nut, as Lyrics did earlier. But in independence of that, I just like butter crust more. And I'll admit, things like Crisco, things like lard have their place and potentially can be better for certain crusty applications. That actually sounds negative. Some certain crusted applications, that sounds worse. But I don't know. There's something about the way that butter blends into pie crust that I really enjoy. That's really all I can say about it. I like how it tastes.
If I had to take a guess, it's probably the way the fats are constructed. You know, I think with butter, the fats are probably easier to kind of meld in with everything. Kind of get more of that evenly distributed, like across the board. Fat. I don't know.
Well,
That's
I can put on, because we've entered my domain. We spent a lot of time today in your domain. I'll put on my domain. So in terms of lipid structure, butter isn't entirely that different in terms of how as a fat
constructed.
how would it integrate into the dough. The biggest thing that sets it apart are the milk solids and the water content.
Okay.
Because one of the really interesting things about butter as opposed to lard is that lard, if you just buy it as opposed to making it at home, is broadly speaking purified animal fat, right? Usually pork fat.
Yeah.
And as a result, it is distinct but uniform, which makes it very easy to integrate into things, and why it can be comparable to things like ghee. Crisco obviously fits, or like coconut oil. All of those sort of fit the mold for what the strengths of lard is.
Yeah.
Butter is really interesting, one, because it has actual protein solids suspended within it, and because it has water content. As best as we can try, butter is a suspended solution. It's an emulsion, really, of a high concentration of fat with a certain amount of water. And the reason I particularly love butter in crust is specifically for that reason, because yes, you get a slightly stickier crust, but if you blind bake it, then you get an incredible caramelization of those milk solids. And if you don't blind bake it, depending on what you're putting in there, you either fucked up or you're going to get a really good bake, just because you have something that kind of cuts you against it. You can get a little bit more intense on the flour, and you can kind of take it to the rolling board a little bit more. And I honestly think that empowers a butter crust over, let's say, a lard crust to have more depth of flavor, because you have a little bit more water, so it's a little bit more forgiving, but you have those milk solids, which gives you this breadth of flavor that once they toast up, once they roast up in that oven, there's not a lot in this world that compares. Now, what you could do is, if you make your lard at home, just retain some of those protein solids in there. Just keep them, and you'll be surprised how good they taste. If you ever roast a duck and you don't retain the fat from that, you deserve to die in a fire, because that's just amazing. Duck fat is a work of art. But I don't actually think I've ever made a pie crust out of duck fat. I don't know I don't know if it would actually make a good pie crust, because it wouldn't be flaky. It'd be a short crust, but it wouldn't be a flaky crust.
So whenever you mention duck fat, all I can ever think of was when we lived together, and there was not just the cup of duck fat that you kept, that you had herbs lined in and whatnot. It was very good. But how you used to have the propensity to use milk jugs for broth.
Mm.
And I will never forget one morning waking up and blindly pouring myself some cereal and some beef broth, and getting a spoonful into my cereal and going, "This isn't milk."
It's better than milk. It's bone broth.
It was okay.
You know what? You know what I was actually thinking about from those days as well recently. Not to keep this on a nostalgia trek. I was remembering our attempts to make lambda spread,
Yes.
and how we would use the leftover whey from X's attempts at making mozzarella,
Yep.
and then we would just try to dump as much protein and fat and energy into it. And I was reading a really interesting article from National Geographic about, you know, that hunter that they found in the mountains that was like 5,000 years old, and he was perfectly preserved, and they were able to track his tattoos and everything. His name was Oli from the, I think it's the Oleazark Alps. All of those details don't really matter too much. But what does matter is when I was reading that article, they specifically touched on the fact that his diet was perfect for long treks in the forest. Specifically, there was a lot of fat, and there was also a lot of good dried proteins.
Yeah.
And I wonder if our greatest mistake was that we never tried to put our pulled pork recipe into our lambda spread, because that had a ton of fat, because that's what good pulled pork should be.
Like almost like making it into like a pemmican bread.
Exactly. But with pulled pork.
Yeah. No, honestly, I'm halfway tempted to try that.
Because I'm not going to lie, if we're going for the most calorie-dense bread possible, and we could definitely do it, if we went for a high-gluten base, that's just filled with as much fat and protein as we can fill it with, then baked out with some good sugars, I think we may finally make the proper lambda spread.
Yeah, that would certainly be one way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's worth a shot. I don't know how it's going to go. I'll have to do some experimental bakes first. But I think that would be a potential option.
Yeah, I am excited to see how this goes. We'll have to keep you posted.
All right. I will. And so, without further ado, let me go to our last topic of the evening. At least the last scheduled topic I have for the evening. Which is specifically around something I like to call the surprise loaf. And I'm going to put this up into the screen in a moment. Also, did you know that wineberries were from Japan?
Yeah, they're typically called, Japanese raspberries? Something like that?
Something like that. I just saw the note. Okay. So, what I wanted to talk about was weird food trends from the annals of history. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about were aspics, jello molds, and the art of the surprise loaf. Now, just to give some history, when gelatin was first introduced, it made an interesting splash in the culinary community once they realized what it was. And in the early 1900s, there was a bit of a movement to have these things called aspics, where you would reduce bones and broth down to a clear liquid that was very highly gelatinous, and then you would use it to glaze things over or suspend things in it if you're appropriately rich. And because it took so much time, it was considered a bit of haute cuisine. And I mean, to be honest, this was something that happened well before the early 1900s. But with the advent of packaged gelatin, there was a bit of a renaissance with gelatinized salads and other things. And the result of which was this monstrosity that died in the 1910s, 20s. But in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, they brought it back. And with it, they brought the most horrifying monstrosity that I've ever seen in my culinary life. The weirdest thing I've seen in culinary history thus far. The surprise loaf. Now, the idea behind it, or at least the history behind it, was that there was a cookbook in the 1930s, coincidentally published by General Electric of all people, that was called the Silent Hostess Treasure Book. And they introduced this idea of a surprise loaf. And the way that it worked was you would take this idea of this horrible gelatinous aspic idea, and then you would take it to the nth degree by taking a whipped combination of cream cheese and cheddar cheese that was pulverized. Usually American cheese is really what they're going for. So that you could get effectively an icing. Then you would take a relish or a gelatinized salad. You'd put it between 2 loaves of bread, sometimes 3, as you can see in the image above. And then you'd ice the bread like this unholy sandwich with your cream cheese and American cheese spread. So not only would you have this horrifying Jell-O monstrosity in between, you would then package it as if it was a regular loaf of bread, garnished with radish roses and other fun quackery of culinary history. Now, this disturbs me on a fundamental level. But at the same time, I desperately want to make some.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know why, but I feel like this is like the year that we're in, right? The current year. We are in the perfect historical timeline to go and bring back the horrors of our culinary past in typical postmodern fashion, and both mock them by copying them, but also leverage the incredible food technology that we've made to this day to actually make them taste good.
Interesting.
Because I'm convinced.
You really think you could make something like that actually taste good?
I don't actually just think I could do it. I don't just think I could do it. I know I could do it. I was drinking some beer.
Yeah, but the pause was damning. You really had to think for a second.
No, I was drinking. I just wanted to swallow first before I spoke.
Yeah, it's very fair.
I'm convinced that with the current technology that we have and with the current abilities that I, in theory, possess, this cake on the bottom, or surprise loaf, which is honestly the worst thing you could name a dish.
Yeah, that is absolutely the worst name for it.
This surprise loaf, I think this is the prime candidate for some desertification. I'm thinking a proper Genoese sponge. I'm thinking some orange tinted frosting. I'm thinking we do this horrifying thing as sweet and as savory, where we clone the sponge with chicken Kiev and collard greens. And I don't know what sauce yet, but I'll think of it. And while it will look as bad as a dish called a surprise loaf will look, or should look, I think I can make this taste good.
All right. I mean, if you think you can, I mean, I'm not gonna tell you no. I just don't. I don't know.
I'm willing to put this to the test. I have dinner parties somewhat frequently.
Mhm.
I 100% want to serve
Yes.
a traditional aspic-based 1960s style dinner. Or aspic-themed dinner. And I want to make everything good. Not good despite looking like this. I want to make everything actually good. I don't think I can pull it off, if I'm honest. But I am willing to try. Though I'm going to be honest, and this might sound bad, but knowing what I've read about this recipe, and now that I'm looking at this bottom image, this weird bread relish monstrosity, if I imagine this relish to be some proper South Carolina stewed collard greens, I'm kind of getting into it. Like, if some crazy ass hostess served this to me, I'm increasingly convinced I would eat some. And I'm even more increasingly convinced that I would enjoy it. But the top one, nah, fuck that noise. Like, what the hell is this? Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to highlight some stuff from America's culinary history that made a comeback. What blows my mind about this particular bit of trends, of a food trend,
Is that it came back?
is that it came back in full force. This wasn't like a niche thing. This was a big fucking deal. I don't get it. Not these in particular. I've put in the surprise loaf as the image for this podcast. At least for the stream. But the crazy shit that people would suspend in Jell-O. Like, let's not even talk about Jell-O salads. Because that's just... I don't get it still. I mean, I get it in terms of... I get that people did it. It just bothers me that people did. And it was mainstream. And people were talking about it. And people were like, oh man, you know what I really love? Some motherfucking Jell-O salad. What the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know. This is an abomination against everything that, like, I hold dear. So I don't know how to feel about any of this.
I just feel hurt, taken advantage of. Like I went into history to find something good and I came back damaged. But on that happy note, that concludes our scheduled segments for the evening.
So soon?
Yeah. I think now's a good time for closing remarks. If you have anything you wanted to throw out there.
Whatever that thing is that I'm seeing on my screen right now is not food.
Joe, come and visit me. It will become food.
Never.
It will be all you eat. Forever.
Speaking
It will
of that,
become the new Joe food.
I was about to say, speaking of that, that'll be a little story I guess I'll end off on. So I was once stranded, when I was in college, I was once stranded at a friend of mine's place for about 72 hours, and he only fed me Hershey's cookies and cream bars. So I ate Hershey's cookies and cream bars and drank water and alcohol for 72 hours. That was my only form of sustenance.
Until we came and rescued him.
Yes, I was rescued. On the third day, I was rescued. So it is generally known now as Joe food.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's...
Actually, you know what? I have one last topic to hit on before we round out.
Yeah.
So, as you well know, one of my greatest dirty pleasures in terms of, like, horrible snack food is Flaming Hot Cheetos limon flavor.
Okay.
Well, recently, Flaming Hot Cheetos decided that was a little bit too ethnic for their tastes. And so they released a white man's Flaming Hot Cheetos. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, so I want to ask you, what do you think the new flavor of Flaming Hot Cheetos is?
Tabasco.
For white people, Joe, for white people.
Mayo.
Whiter.
For Flaming Hot Cheetos?
Yes. Flaming Hot Cheetos they had to make it more white. And they couldn't make it mayo because that would be weird.
You underestimate my powers.
That's true. It was the next best thing. I'm just challenging you. What do you think?
Okay.
No, better than that. Actually, no. Old Bay sounds delicious. Worse
That
than
would actually
that.
be really good. Actually be really good. I kind of want to try that now.
Yeah. Why'd you do this? Now I'm getting hungry. Shit. All right, come on,
I don't
man.
know what is it.
They are flaming hot Cheetos ranch.
No,
Let me see if I can pull up a picture.
no. Oh, come on.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's worse than that. They're Chipotle ranch.
Oh, please. I have a family. Don't do this to me.
Now, being the slut I am for flavored flaming hot Cheetos, I tried them.
Boy, how was it?
Not good, Joe. Just not good.
Well, maybe we were gonna be surprised. Maybe it was gonna be like, they weren't all that bad, guys.
No. The surprise is that they exist. The surprise is that they were made. And the biggest surprise is that they haven't been struck from this horrible earth. I'm going to put this on the screen now, Joe. Trigger warning. Horrifying snack experiences. Look at this. Look at this monstrosity. They have a molcajete. I might have butchered that. But they have one of those freaking beautiful mortal and pestilence. And they have Chester Cheetah pouring ranch on a pepper and using a Cheeto as the pestle. Actually, that's a good question because I'm suddenly blanking. Is the mortar the bowl or the macerator?
Well, I'm not 100%.
All right, I'm not going to doubt myself in this important moment. Look at this. Burn this into your eyes.
I don't want to.
This is God's work going to die. This is what happens when the snake wins. Satan was victorious on this day.
So, if it does make you feel any better, the mortar is in fact the bowl, the pestle is in fact the blunt-shaped object.
I feel better, but not about the fact that this exists.
Marginally so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I don't want to see this.
So, yeah, I'm going to move it back to the beers because that's a happier day and a happier time before we knew that this existed. But in typical Matt form, I had to talk shit about something. And the thing I had to talk shit about most was Cheetos. Why did you do this? I know ranch-flavored things are in vogue right now. And I know that some dumbass decided that putting ranch powder in their fried chicken was going to taste good. First of all, fuck you, whoever did that. Just wanted to put that out there. But second of all, ranch-flavored things are not good. They can be good, but they're good in the way of, like, heroin being good. You enjoy being on heroin. But when you're not on heroin, you're reminded of the fact that heroin is in your life. That is how I treat ranch. And how you all should treat ranch. And with that, we're coming up on 2 hours of broadcast time. And I think it's about that time to end. Joe, any closing remarks about this disgusting ranch-filled world that we live in?
I don't want to think about this. I think I'm good.
Well, alrighty. To all of those who tuned in tonight, to all of those who were in chat tonight, to all of those who were listening, I'm sorry. You survived something worse than I could ever describe. Our podcast. But more importantly than that, you had to see Chipotle Ranch Flaming Hot Cheetos. And that's just wrong. But we hope we filled your lives with some happiness. We hope to round out this show with a smile. So cheers to you all, and cheers to you, Joe. And with that, I end this cast. Good night.
it